Yep, we're talking about variables. And today, we're going to make them super, super simple. I mean, have you ever thought about it? How does a game keep track of your score? Or how does a website remember to say, hey, welcome back with your name? It kind of feels like magic, right? But it's not. The program just needs a place to store that information. And in Python, that is exactly the job of a variable. So what even is a variable? Well, the textbook definition says it's an object used to store information. At its core, that's right. It's just a named storage spot for some data that you might need to use or maybe even change a little later on. But you know what? Let's make that way simpler. Forget all the jargon like objects and storage. The absolute best way to think about a variable is just as a labeled box. Seriously, that's it. The label you scribble on the box, that's the variable's name. And whatever you decide to put inside the box, that's its value. Simple, right? Now here's one of the things that makes Python so cool, and it's a huge reason why so many people love it. In a lot of other programming languages, you have to be really specific. You'd have to say, okay, this box is a number box, and you can only put numbers in it. But Python? Well, Python's a lot smarter. It's what we call dynamically typed, which is just a fancy way of saying it looks at what you put inside the box and figures it out all on its own. It's a total game changer, and it makes coding so much faster.
Okay, so we've got these labeled boxes ready to go. What are the first things we're going to put inside? Well, let's start with one of the most common things you'll ever use: numbers.
So in Python's world, there are basically two main kinds of numbers you're going to work with. First up, you've got integers. These are your simple whole numbers. No fractions, no decimals, just clean whole numbers. And then you have floating point numbers, or what everyone just calls floats. These are any numbers that have a decimal point. It's as simple as that. And making one of these integer variables? Well, it's just as easy as it looks. You come up with a name for your box. Here, we're calling it myInt. You use a single equal sign, and then you give it a whole number. And boom, just like that, you've told Python, hey, store the number 7 in a box that's labeled myInt.
Making a float is pretty much the same deal. You can do it in two ways. You can just type the number with a decimal point like 7.0, and Python instantly knows, that's a float. Or you can be extra clear and tell Python to treat a number as a float by using the float function. Either way, both of these lines of code do the exact same thing. They make a variable called myFloat and put the decimal value 7.0 inside.
All right, so boxes for numbers? Check. But our programs aren't just about math, are they? What about storing text? Like a person's name, or a message, or a welcome greeting. For that, we need a whole different kind of variable.
In Python, whenever you're dealing with any kind of text, we call that a string. To let Python know you're making a string, you just have to wrap your text in either single quotes or double quotes. It actually doesn't matter which one you choose. Both of these examples here create the exact same string variable.
Okay, so you're probably asking yourself, if they both do the same thing, why are there two options? Well, this little quote right here gives us a massive clue.
And here is the answer. Let's say you want to store the word don't. If you try to wrap that in single quotes, Python sees the apostrophe and gets confused. It thinks you're trying to end the string way too early, and your program will error out. But if you wrap the whole thing in double quotes, Python is smart enough to understand that the apostrophe is just part of the text. It's such a tiny detail, but trust me, it'll save you a ton of headaches later on.
So, we've got our number boxes and our text boxes. But they're not really that useful just sitting there by themselves, are they? The real fun, the real power, comes when we start making them interact with each other.
And this is just a perfect example of how Python uses context. Check out the plus sign. When you use it with numbers like 1 plus 2, it does exactly what you'd expect. It adds them together to get 3. But when you use that exact same plus sign with strings, it does something totally different. It combines them, or as programmers say, it concatenates them. So here we're combining hello, a space, and world to create one single string, hello world. Same symbol, totally different behavior, all based on the type of variable. Pretty smart, huh?
Oh, and here's a cool little Python trick for you. Instead of setting up your variables on different lines, Python lets you do it all at once. This one line, a, b equals 3, 4, does the exact same thing as writing a equals 3 and then b equals 4 on the next line. It's just a really clean, quick way to get things set up. So we've seen the plus sign works for numbers and it works for strings. But what do you think happens if we try to use it to add a number and a string together? Is Python going to get confused? Let's find out. So let's take a look at this code. We're telling the program to add the number 1 plus the number 2
plus the string hello. Now the program can handle the first part. 1 plus 2 equals 3. But then what? How do you even mathematically add the word hello to the number 3?
And yeah, the answer is you just can't do that. It doesn't make sense. So this will cause your program to stop and give you an error. Specifically, it's called a type error because you tried to use an operation, in this case addition, on types that are incompatible. And this is a super common mistake for beginners, but the good news is now you know exactly why it happens.
All right, I know that was a bunch of theory, but you've totally got the key ideas down. Integers, floats, strings, and how they all work together. You know, the best way to really make all this stuff stick is to actually write some code yourself. So, how about we put it into practice with a little challenge?
Okay, here is your mission. Using everything we just covered, I want you to create 3 different variables. First, an integer named myInt and give it the value 20. Second, a float named myFloat with the value 10.0. And finally, a string named myString with the text hello. So go on, pause this, and give it a shot. And that's really it. I know it seems simple, but you now understand the single most important concept in all of programming. Every complicated app, every video game, every website you use, they all start with this one simple idea, storing information in variables. So the only question left is, now that you have the fundamental building blocks, what are you going to build first?